Stand By Me is a 1986 release coming-of-age drama directed by Rob Reiner. And firstly, welcome back. Well, welcome us back, because as you will have probably noticed, especially the people that follow us religiously, we've been away for about a month, I think, since the last one went up. Essentially, life got in the way. You know, we are in COVID times still, some of us, most of us, unfortunately, and work and other things have kind of taken precedent over the last few weeks. And we also kind of thought we'd just have a bit of a break before we completely burn out. And so here we are, back afresh with Stand By Me.
Yeah, so, not an unfamiliar film to most, obviously based on a Stephen King novella. But it's set in the small town of Castle Rock, as many of his stories are. And it's the tale of four young friends, Gordy, Chris, Teddy and Vern, who set out on a hike after learning the location of the body of a missing boy who's about their age. You know, they hope to find the body and then sort of find fame with the locals, you know, for their discovery. But they're not the only ones looking for this body. Kiefer Sutherland's Ace, the sort of local small-time hood, is also, you know, looking for it and hoping for the same sort of recognition and fame that it might bring. As this is a sort of coming-of-age, rites of passage film, along the way they learn about life and death and lose their innocence as well.
Yes, indeed. Stand By Me. So, like you said at the beginning, it's not unfamiliar one, this one. It's actually... It's a very famous one, so it's kind of different. We tend to cover, you know, we try to focus on more obscure or lesser known films. This is obviously a very famous film, but there is a purpose for this. So about 2 or 3 weeks ago, a very close old friend of mine sadly passed away. And this is kind of, although I don't really have any connection to him with movies, we were more connected with music. So this, I have no connection to him, but it's the kind of the themes of this film that I have the connection to him with. You know, he was a friend that I met when we were 7, you know, and he was also one of those, in this film, he was always a bit of a cross between Chris Chambers and Teddy. You know, he's the kind of bit of a loose cannon. You know? He was the kid that we would go off, you know, I lived in the country, we lived in the countryside, I lived in a very small village in the countryside. And we would kind of go off and get up to mischief and get into trouble.
You're not far from train tracks around here, are you?
No, and in fact, that train tracks came into mine and his past lives. We had a bit of a... there was obviously, you know, before talking about the film, if you know this film, there is a famous scene on a railway bridge. Well, we kind of had a similar thing, you know, not with any train involved, thank God, but we have a long train tunnel near us, and it was a bit of a kind of local rite of passage to walk through the train, walk through the tunnel by yourself. And we didn't do it. I didn't by myself. I did it with him. I wasn't going to do it, but he got me to do it, and I did it. And very stupid. You think back now, it's like, what were we doing? But I was about 12. So so he was one of those friends that, you know, I'll never forget. It's a film about reminiscing your past. I mean, the whole setup is Richard Dreyfuss, who's writing this story and looking back at his past. But it's such a great film. It's such a warm, and I think it plays probably to both, you know, men and women. It probably, everyone had those children. You may not have lived in the same situation or that. I mean, this is 1959. You know, when I grew up, I'm going back to the late 80s, early 90s. But there's similar feelings, similar things happen. Plus, it's a very good film. You know, it's well acted. It's a really good movie. This one I hadn't seen for quite a while. I mean, I watched it a lot growing up, and I probably, you know, I came to it when I was that age. I think the first time I saw it, I was, I don't know, 12 or 13 maybe. So I hit it at the right age. It's, you know, I don't know. I hope it's one of those films that if you look back on it, if you watch it now, maybe, I don't know if it has the same effect on kids now. I do feel like it could be quite timeless because it was set. It was set before it was, you know, it was made in the 80s, but it was set in the 50s. So obviously that didn't matter for me when it was set.
No.
The themes and the issues going on with the children are very relatable to everyone. But yeah, so that's why we've chosen this film. But it's a good one to look back on.
Definitely, yeah.
Well.
I can't remember when I first saw it. I think I was an adult, so it doesn't quite have the same effect on me. But no, I can certainly appreciate it for what it is, and it's you know, a big Stephen King fan as well. Although I've never read that. I've got the book that it's in different seasons, along with the story that Shawshank is based on, an apt pupil as well, which is a kind of a little bit of a forgotten about Stephen King adaptation, that one. Although this copy looks a bit dog-eared, I've never actually read it. Yeah, no, anything Stephen King I'm definitely up for. So, and it's great. I mean, the cast are brilliant, the four boys. I mean, they were cast for their personalities, basically. You know, they all sort of fit the characters, and that shows. And you know, they did lots of sort of theatrical exercises to sort of to get to know each other and get familiar with each other, and that definitely shows on screen. You know, they're a lot of the time the relationship you see on screen is real, because they built that bond before filming started. That comes across.
Yeah, it is a great cast. It's kind of the quintessential Brat Pack movie, because all of them in it are from that. You know, you think of another film, possibly Lost Boys. I mean, Goonies as well. But you know, Lost Boys, the vampires, they're not all that. I mean, Kiefer Sutherland obviously is very well known. Alex Winters is very well known, but the other two not so well known in that Brat Pack. But this film features all of them. You know, I mean, there's a couple in Kiefer Sutherland's gang that maybe aren't as well known, but most of the faces are all very recognisable, and all went on to have successful careers in later lives. Some in TV and most of them in film, and even down to, I mean, Gordy's. So you know, one of the other, as you mentioned, this is about Lost as well. So in it, Gordy's older brother has passed away before the story takes place, and even him, I mean, he's hardly in the film, but that's John Cusack, who's another, you know, great actor. So I think that really helps to kind of, you know, bring this film together in a kind of performance way. It's also interesting how, I mean, it is written by Stephen King, and he is a great writer. I mean, I personally haven't read a lot of, I think you've read a lot of his horror, supernatural stuff, which I haven't read as much of. I have read The Body, and I had the Buckman books, which had The Running Man and Rage, which is a really good story. The Long Walk, which is one of my favourite Stephen King stories. Misery. I kind of prefer maybe his non-supernatural stuff, although I've read The Shining and a couple of the other ones. But he is such a great writer, and there is a moment in here where, so obviously, as in most Stephen King books and films, the main character is a writer. So the main character here is a writer.
In the book, Gordy is not. I mean, he's narrating it, but he's not really the main character like he is in the film.
No.
And I think when Rob Reiner came on board, he identified, because Gordy has, you know, daddy issues, shall we say, because because he's, you know, his older brother was he was a football player, and his, you know, their dad was mainly focused on his brother, and wasn't that bothered about what Gordy was doing. He, you know, didn't see any value in writing stories. He's sort of struggling for sort of attention and recognition from his father, and that's how Rob Reiner felt about, you know, about his father, Carl Reiner, to a certain degree, because obviously, you know, he's a hugely famous comedian. You know, he struggled to sort of feel like he could live up to that. So he sort of bolstered the Gordy role to make him more of the main part.
Yeah, which absolutely works, I think, you know, and he has the loss in there. So you've got the loss of the brother, which helps propel that story along as well. But what I was kind of initially saying was that, so there's a scene in here where Gordy tells a story to his friends. They're out at night around a campfire, and he tells this hilarious story about this kid who's basically, you'll all know it if you've seen it. Pie is like a bake out pie eats, I think they call it. And, you know, they had to eat all this pie, and then it turns into kind of a messy end sequence, which is very funny. But what I thought was interesting about that is that scene, none of the actors there are faces I know, which I think, I don't know if that was done on purpose, but they're not very recognisable faces in there. So it feels like it is a story. It feels like a piece of fiction, which I always thought was quite interesting, where you've got this very well-known main cast, and then within that you've got this kind of fantasy story that he tells with a cast of kind of unknown actors. I'm sure some of them are maybe known to American audiences, but for me, I thought that was, I always thought that was quite interesting, because they're not as well known. So it makes you, so the illusion of it being a fictional story actually works even better. But yeah, I think, I mean, I'm a huge fan of a lot of these. You know, Kiefer Sutherland I was a huge fan of. Lost Boys was one of my favourites growing up. Corey Feldman and River Phoenix, of course. You know, I mean, it's a great River Phoenix part, and, you know, watching it now, I mean, obviously it's, you know, it's just what, 2-3 weeks since my friend died, so it's kind of, that whole sequence with him is quite emotional. I found it quite emotional watching this film, I think, because it is a film about memories. It is a film about reminiscing about your childhood, and that's something I did with my friend. You know, it was something, because he didn't live, he moved away like many years ago, but when we occasionally got together, that's what we did a lot.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
just kind of reminisced about our childhood and the crazy stuff we used to get up to. But it's I think it's a great film. It's one of those films that has great moments in it. You know, the moment with the leeches in the water and the
Which actually happened to Stephen King.
right, cool, yeah, and the train track. Did that one happen to him?
I don't think so. Well, I think no, I can't remember. Possibly. I mean, this is the thing. It's kind of an autobiographical story
Yeah,
for
it
him.
is. Yeah,
And I think after it came out, he said it was the most successful adaptation of any of his work at that time. And I think I don't think he means successful as in it's box office or whatever. I think he means like most faithful, because before this you'd had Carrie and The Shining and The Dead Zone and various others. Arguably people say, well, The Shining's better than this or Carrie's better than this. As far as Stephen King was concerned, I think that's what he means, is that it's the most faithful adaptation. And obviously because it is sort of semi-autobiographical, it's obviously very close to his heart. And quite emotional for him as well. When he watched it, I think
there's an amazing documentary on a disc which features. It's a good one because it features a lot of the cast members talking. Rob Reiner himself, and also Stephen King's in there as well. And he talks about it, the book as being. It started off as he wanted to write a story about him when he was a child, but obviously yes, the going off. The story, he needed a hook, as writers do, and the hook for him was, maybe these kids need to go on a journey. I think that's why it's probably very much loved, this film, because it does make you think of your childhood, and they don't get up to anything too outlandish. There are films, obviously. I mean, The Goonies is another great one, but I've found that since getting older, I can't watch it as much as I don't enjoy it as much as I used to, and I think that's because it's pretty outlandish, what they get up to. Whereas this is so much more real. I mean, there is a scene in here. I had my friend was a complete tearaway, and he got into, he met some kids in the local town, which is where I live now. He got into the wrong crowd often in his life, and he got in with, I don't know, something had happened, and we were up at our railway station, and these kids turned up and pulled a knife on him. I was only about 13, and so there were. It was a turning moment. It was a coming of age moment.
Yeah.
For me. It was like, whoa, what do I do in this situation? Which was crazy, and and there was a scene in this film where a similar thing happens, and so I think, in that regard, this film, whilst most, I was very innocent. I had a lot of. I didn't. Certainly, that wasn't my.
I never got you into any scrapes like that.
No, you didn't.
Sorry.
No. Well,
It's very boring existence.
That's a different thing, because I met you a couple of years after I met this guy. He was more. We'd go out and I smoked my first cigarette with him and other things. And but no, we were kind of more watching. I had the connection with films with you, and we go to the cinema and stuff like that. It was a very different friendship. But so I think in that regard, I think this film, it has it's a lot of memories for a lot of people, I think, in this film, and it's a wonderful cast. It's really well directed. It's really nicely shot as well. It's kind of, I think it's Oregon. Was it around Oregon?
Yeah.
It was filmed. It's obviously similar to the Goonies, and it's a beautiful part of the world. And they're out in the countryside, and there were nice sunsets and things. And it's just a great film that kind of takes you back to your childhood a bit. But I have it on Blu-ray, which is just it's a 25th anniversary edition of
There you
it.
go. So I've got the DVD, which I think it's got all the same stuff on it, but that's got an extra picture-in-picture commentary, I think, isn't it?
It does,
with
yes.
Will Wheaton and Corey Feldman and Rob Reiner.
It does.
And then I think it was released on 4K. I don't know, last year, I think, or the year before, and that's got deleted scenes on it, which
Oh, really?
have seen the light of day until now. So,
I didn't know that. That's interesting. Maybe I'll have to have a look at that sometime.
So-
But this has the Walking the Tracks of Summer of Stand By Me, which is a really good documentary, which kind of goes quite in depth. Like you say, it talks about the kind of the theatre
games and
games
things
that they did together, and Jerry O'Connell talks about the fact that they had, I think it was one of the movies he had the most rehearsal time on, which is, I think that's, Rob Reiner is such a great director. He's made so many great films in his life, but obviously there's a lot of actors that often talk about most films nowadays, you don't have that luxury of rehearsing a lot, and I think actors really enjoy the freedom to be able to rehearse a film. Obviously, they're actors, to be able to go away and really get to grips with who they are, who their character is. It shows when actors are allowed to do that.
Yeah.
It totally shows in those films, and those films I think they're the ones that go on to become classics. I think not always. I don't think that for everything, but I think there are certain films that require really good acting. And there were scenes. I mean, he talks about in this. There were scenes in this film where he wanted to do these long takes, and they're young guys. They're young actors, and it's quite hard for a young actor to remember all those lines and keep going with it. And the rehearsal helps them with that. And there were some wonderful long takes in this where they do all just flow naturally. And I think it's a really great film for its like a good class in acting for young.
Definitely. Again, it shows that I think River Phoenix would have had an amazing career. It probably still would be having an amazing career now. As we said when we covered My Own Private Idaho, you could just see from a young age that he was a really talented actor.
Yeah, but his brother has kind of taken over the mantle hasn't he? And an extraordinary acting career he's had as well. But no, I think it's a great film, and it's a nice disc. I will definitely look at the 4K one. Who was that released by? Do you know? Or was it just
Sony, presumably? I don't know. No, it wasn't like a Arrow or anything like that. Is that what you mean?
No, yeah. No, it's just a standard, just a standard release.
Yeah.
This also has the Stand By Me music video with featuring River Phoenix and Will Wheaton, which is a little bit of fun, nostalgia on there as well. And of course, I mean that's what this is a great soundtrack.
Yeah, we haven't talked about that. Of course, the title is taken from the song. Yeah, there's loads of you've got Buddy Holly and things like that in there. Of course, I think they were originally going to go with the same title as the book, The Body. They thought it didn't sell the film. People wouldn't realise what it was about. They think it was a bodybuilding thing or just another sort of Stephen King horror thing.
True.
Whereas I think there's a Stand By Me was the least disliked out of all the options, so they couldn't really decide on anything that was brilliant. So that was the one that was.
It's a good title. It's a good title. It's an effective title. You know what it means when you watch the film. But it's not too in your face. It's kind of but then of course it's the same name as the title, the song as well, which works perfectly.
And it's certainly not the first to take film to take its name from a song title, is it, and put the song in the film? So
absolutely not, and it won't be the last.
No, I'm sure it won't. So of course, Rob Reiner went on to direct Misery as well, another Stephen King adaptation.
Misery is a fantastic film as well, and I think it's and Stephen King again. He says in the documentary here, although films. What is it? He says films. He actually says a great quote. How films and almost like apples and oranges. Films and
they both taste great.
They both taste great, but they taste very differently. Exactly, and obviously the film oftentimes has to be has to do its own thing. It has to maybe take some stuff from the book, but not everything, because obviously books can be much longer as well. And but he seems to really be happy. Obviously, a lot of people know his dislike of the Shining by Kubrick, whereas this one he seems to be happier with this one, and he must have been, because obviously Rob Reiner went on to do Misery with him as well.
I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Some of his some of the adaptations of his work turn into absolute stone cold classics, and others are
not so much.
Yeah, not so great.
Yeah, and not always. I used to be under the impression that the ones that he has nothing to do with were classics, and the one he does weren't so much. But that's not true, because this one he must have been alongside this one, and this is a great film.
Yeah, I mean, Misery, I don't think it changed a huge amount from the book. Misery doesn't change a huge amount from the book, from what I can remember. It's a long time since I read it or watched it, but they're pretty similar. Yeah,
I love Misery. It's horrible. It's a great film though, but. I think he's a great writer, and there are some wonderful, even his not so good ones, they're really enjoyable. There's some really great, Stephen King adaptations on film out there. So that was Stand By Me, and as always, if you enjoyed the video, let us know in the comments below.
Hit the subscribe button up there, and don't forget to push the bell for notifications. There's other videos to check out over there. Come and find us on social media, and join us again soon for another video.